Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Today we're going to talk about the Las Vegas alien case again and how this case really was something that no one expected to happen. I don't think anyone in the government expected this to happen. I don't think that people in the UFO community expected something like this to happen. A lot of people who have been strong voices for UFO disclosure, they did not expect this to happen. They thought that it's going. I think that a lot of people in the UFO community believe that that they would the end all evidence, the absolute evidence that shows that we are not alone, was going to come at some point by people within the government. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. As we all know, back in early April, Scott Roeder, the crime scene reconstruction expert, had determined that video that was shot by the Kenmore family back in on the early morning hours of May 1st, 2023, showed alien creatures. There's just no question about it. But I just think this, as time goes on, I've come to the conclusion that this is not the way a lot of people wanted it to go down, and now what has happened is that it's being suppressed. It has been suppressed for a while now. The people in the UFO community. There were certain commentators early on after Roeder had made his presentation, who tried to say that that they still didn't believe it, that it was shadows and this and that or the other, that it was harmful to the UFO discussion. They have since not talked about this. A lot of people in the UFO community refuse to talk about this because this wasn't how they saw this happening. They didn't want it. They didn't want it to happen. They had apparently a lot of people in the UFO community had different ideas in mind. I don't know. Some of them are egomaniacs, I believe, and they thought that that they would be at the forefront when this finally happened, and others are still they just don't want to accept it. They can't accept it. The ontological shock of the entire package of evidence that has been presented, which shows. I mean, I'm not going to get into all of it here today. I've talked about this. I've shown video of this numerous times. I'll show a little bit today to show just how to illustrate just how concrete this proof is. I mean, it nailed it. It's over, right? As Scott Roeder and myself have stated in recent months, it's been over since this proof has been presented. It's over. There's no going back now. That this serves as the evidence to show the world that there's an extraterrestrial presence here. However, the UFO community, for the most part, a lot of it, still does not accept this, won't even talk about it. And one of the reasons they don't want to talk about it is because they know they can't argue against it, because if they try, they're not going to look like truthful human beings. That's one of the issues that they have at this point. They can't try to debunk this. Debunkers won't even go near it because, for the most part, I mean, there was one guy that recently that tried to, and it just obviously it didn't work out too well. So there's just no debunking it. The UFO community doesn't want disclosure to happen this way. This is not what anyone expected. It was not on anyone's radar. I mean, even though the proof was floating out there, we just didn't have we weren't able to prove that that this meant something, that the video that was filmed by the family during the late night hours of April 30th, 2023, and the early morning hours of May 1st, 2023, we were unable to, a lot of researchers, a lot of people who were looking at this, a lot of people who believed the family, there was nothing, you couldn't nail anything down, but not until Scott Roeder was able to show scientifically that there were creatures in that yard, 8 to 10 foot tall beings, along with, I believe, other creatures. I think there was a lot of beings in that yard, and it serves as the proof. But the problem is, this is not how pro-disclosure advocates saw this coming. They don't want it to happen this way. The government, obviously, the secret control group, obviously doesn't want to even talk about this. I've sent that letter out almost 2 months ago now. I never received a response. I sent a letter to the Pentagon, as well as a courtesy copy to the Department of Energy, and I received no response on this. But that's because what are they going to say? What are they going to say? Because anything they say, any kind of response, will have to be talked about in media. I mean, so why if they say anything, if they try to debunk it, then that puts a spotlight back onto this case, and people like Scott Roeder and others, my podcast, and and there's a number of other podcasts out there that have accepted this evidence and know that it constitutes the end-all absolute proof that a lot of people in the UFO community have been waiting for. They'll be able to respond to any sort of debunking effort from the government, as well as anyone from the UFO community who believe that this is not the way they wanted it to happen. I mean, there are a lot of people have been researching this for a long time, and they just want to keep the status quo, apparently. I've talked about this before, and there are people out there that don't even want to be they don't want their names. They don't even want their names associated with this because they're afraid of it. They don't want to have to answer questions with regard to it. This is to me, it's absurd. But at the same time, this is the world we live in. Obviously, the powers that be within the secret control group within the government, as well as members of the UFO community itself, who are pro-disclosure advocates who talk a big game, but then when the evidence is finally presented, they don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. They want to stay away from it. And it's just the world we're living in. It's just the way things are. This is, I don't know. Some of them I believe it's ego issues. Some of them might be some of them might be plants, like I've talked about in a previous show. I do believe that there are plants within the UFO community who are there to suppress and debunk any sort of evidence like this that finally raises to the surface. They're there to try to tamp it back down. Now it seems like over recent last month or so, it seems more or less that the latest the way to handle this, proof that if people in the world if everyone in the world was alerted to it, would know that this shows that we're not alone in this universe. It's the best way to handle it is just to suppress it. Don't talk about it. Don't address it. Don't say nothing about it. Don't try to debunk it, because that's just going to put more eyeballs on it. It's going to get more people interested in wondering what's going on with it. Now we have a bunch of phonies. You go on all over the internet, Twitter, Reddit. Even on YouTube, you get a lot of different commenters, people who are these people? People with some of them are bots, some of them are seems like they're misinformation agents, disinformation agents. I don't know. You get a lot of people out there who say, "Oh, I don't see anything. There's nothing to it." Blah blah blah, in an effort to try to control people. Basically to make people think in a different way, and it works, because a lot of people. I mean, the way I see this world, there's just so many people who are so manipulated so easily by internet, by what no name people tell them on the internet. They believe it. Like they don't even know who this person is, or we're saying certain things, but then they'll believe it anyway. That's just the way things are, just the world we live in. But I was thinking about it today, and it's interesting that the UFO Disclosure Act is now back on the table. There's a bipartisan effort in the Senate to get this out there, to include it in the next National Defense Authorization Act for 2025. Of course, as we all know, last year it was gutted by people who received lots of campaign contributions from defense contractors within the House. But now it's back on the table again, and it needs to stay on the table. We need to have disclosure, folks, because I mean the proof is out there; it's floating around there. And as time goes on, as I stated, right when Roeder made his presentation earlier this year, I mean at some point, more and more people are going to realize that, oh my God, yeah, we're not alone. This shows us for sure that there's something going on here. And of course, it was the comments, the testimony from the family itself. I mean, they talked about this, and in different interviews, different members of the family verified that they saw these 8 to 10 foot tall creatures in their backyard. Not human, definitely not human. There's no way that they're human. There was the 911 call. Police were called. The police believed them. And then there was the strange aspects with regard to the quote meteor. It made a sound as it came down. I mean, there was a lot of different things. It had no heat signature. It wasn't a meteor. I mean, even if it had a heat signature, it wasn't a meteor, because what happened when it came down was alien creatures exited this thing, whatever it was, when it hit the ground. We don't know what happened. If it was we can only guess on what happened in this case. Like we can only speculate on, was there malfunction in the ship? Maybe. We just don't know. Was it a display? Maybe. Some people think it might have been a display, that there was a deliberate thing. I have no idea. Nobody knows really why this thing came down in the backyard of this Las Vegas family. We just don't know. But the fact of the matter is, it did, and there were things inside of it that weren't human, obviously. And you look at the video evidence that they captured on that 1 minute and 41 second long cell phone video. I mean, there was so many different things in there. I mean, that you could see. There were the aspects in there in that video that prove that the family was telling the truth. We have the being whose face appears above the fence. We see the shadow of the creature behind the slats of the fence. There was the creature that we saw movement of something chasing the family out of the yard. Obviously, the family was petrified during this whole incident. And then we actually had them filming the backyard after they got chased out of the yard, and you could see there was something going on there. There were creatures back there. Specifically, there was this creature here. I mean, this to me, I've shown this before. I mean, I'm going in a slow motion here. This is a zoomed in image. You could see there was, like Scott Roeder said, they were using some sort of a cloaking technology, and I believe that there was cloaking technology in play at this moment, and for a few seconds it wasn't working, because you see this disappears and there's an alien head there, and it moves, it turns its head. You can see the big eyes. Look at right there. Look at that thing. I mean, look at, how do you explain that? You can't explain that. To me, I actually have come to the conclusion that this is a smaller creature. I don't think this is one of the, this doesn't make me right. I don't think that this is one of the 8 to 10 foot tall creatures that the family members had seen in the yard. I think that this is a smaller one, probably perhaps a gray creature, like many people have talked about, many alien abductees have talked about. I mean, you can see it though. There's its head. You can see there's an eye there, and it's moving. It's moving. I mean, look at this thing. Look at this. I mean, and there was some cloaking technology going on here too, because it disappears then again. For those few seconds, it's there, and then it disappears. And right before it shows up, you could see that the cloaking technology was. You could see the features of the face distorted. There's a distorted version of that face, and you could see it. It's there, and then it appears. The cloaking disappears momentarily. And there it reveals the alien head hiding in the background, and it moves its head. As you can see, it clearly moves its head. This, to me, ladies and gentlemen, proves that there are alien creatures here, that the whole narrative has veracity, despite what debunkers will tell you, despite what non-believers will tell you, despite what the scientific community, for the most part, has stated over the decades. This shows us that we are not alone. This video, along with the testimony of the family, proves that we are not alone. But the reason I'm talking about this today is I just want to talk about how it just seems to me that they weren't ready for this. Even the UFO community, of course, the government does not. The secret control group that's in charge of this, that's the reverse engineering recovered craft all these decades, they want to keep it a secret. The powers that be want to keep it a secret. Obviously, there are other people like whistleblowers like David Grush who think that the world needs to know about this, and he and others have been speaking with members of Congress and the Senate, and I think it's important that we get over that hump. I think we're all as far as I'm concerned, we're already over that hump, but that's not the way some people. They did not want it to be this way, right? Because if you had a bunch of major mainstream news outlets talking about this every day, how would the world react? How would the world respond? There'd be some. It would change. It changes everything. It changes everything. A lot of people out there are just not ready for this, and we're going to talk about that because there was an opinion piece that was written by an economist a couple of months back, and I want to get into that a little bit to show you how there's just some people who are just living in la la land, and it's not their fault. It's just the way this subject has been treated for all these years, and but it's over, as as we stated before. Here it is. Look at that thing. That's an alien being. You're seeing the head of an alien. That's what it is. And we think that there are other. I believe that there are other alien creatures in this video. It's just harder to you can't really. It's hard to prove it, but they're there. They're there. As one of the witnesses to this event, Angel Kenmore, he indicated that when whatever this object was that hit the ground, he heard what it sounded like thousands of footsteps running in all different directions all around him. I think that whole backyard was filled with aliens for some reason, filled with non-human intelligent creatures. And right here, you're seeing one of them. You're seeing one of them. By the time the police showed up, according to Angel, all of these things had disappeared. All of them were gone. Where'd they go? We don't know. We don't know. We do know that there was, after that object came down, there was a report that there were 2 UFOs flying around in the area where it went down. Somebody from Arizona, a woman from Arizona, had reported reported a meteor that when she saw it going down, all of a sudden 2 UFOs showed up and were circling and disappearing and it seemed like they were searching for something. Maybe that's what maybe that's how those aliens, these creatures, whatever they are, got out of the yard. But it shows you. This evidence shows us that there is no question about it, despite what anybody tells you. This proves that we are not alone. Certainly, no question about it. But anyway, I want to talk about this this editorial from a couple of months back. This was published in Bloomberg News, and let me pull it up here. Yes, this was published in Bloomberg News back in June, and it's written by Tyler Cohen, and he's an economist, and he's a smart guy, right? But he has a this is the view of people who aren't really who really haven't studied this. Okay, this is that's how I take it, and this is an issue, I guess. But anyway, let's go through this and we'll talk about it. He says here, earlier this year, following last summer's congressional hearings on UFOs, the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, issued a 63-page report evaluating almost 80 years of evidence. Its conclusion, not altogether surprising, given the name of the office, can be summarized as follows. Not much to see here. Please move on. It's not altogether surprising. Let me just stop there. It's not altogether surprising to him, but people who have studied this a long time, it is. I mean, it wasn't surprising to us either, but it was more anger-inducing to people like us. We saw a lot of us saw it coming, but in this guy's mind, it's not surprising because he doesn't believe that in this phenomena. He doesn't believe that there's a non-human intelligent presence on this planet. So it's from a different reason than people in the UFO community. Yes, I thought it wasn't surprising either, but at the same time, I know that it's real, right? I know for a fact because I encountered one of these creatures, as well as seen one of the UFOs, as well as now we have the absolute proof that shows that we're not alone. But anyway, he continues. He says the Senate Intelligence Committee isn't buying it. The Intelligence Authorization Act, which passed recently, among other things, calls for a review of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. The bill would also limit research into what are now called UAPs, for unidentified anomalous phenomena, unless Congress is informed, and add whistleblower protections for anyone who might wish to step forward and speak their minds. We already do have some whistleblower protections, but anyway. Less plausible claims about UAPs have been achieving greater circulation, in part because of the efforts of David Grush, who testified before Congress last year about hidden alien bodies, crashed vehicles, and secret conspiracies. Those claims, which primary witnesses have not corroborated, defy belief, and the ensuing controversy has helped make concerns about UAPs appear silly. So look at that paragraph there. So he thinks that because when someone steps forward and says that, like David Grush, and states that there are hidden alien bodies and crashed vehicles and reverse engineering programs, and that he also says they're not corroborated. I guess he doesn't realize that there was at least 40 other whistleblowers who were one or two or have spoken to members of Congress. I don't know if he's aware of that. But it has been corroborated, and of course Grush has his there's people who support Grush too. Some big names like Colonel Carl Nell, for instance. I'm not sure if this guy understands that. Obviously, he hasn't done his homework on this subject. He just doesn't believe it out of hand. He doesn't believe that it has anything to do with extraterrestrial creatures, and he thinks it's silly when you talk like this, right? Alien bodies and crashed vehicles. That makes the whole subject silly. For some reason, all these people think it's silly for some reason. reason. And it shouldn't be. But anyway, we'll get into that later. And continuing, he says, nonetheless, the truth remains that there are systemic sightings and sensor data of fast-moving entities that the government cannot explain. You don't have to think they are space aliens to realize that they are threats to national security. Let me just stop there again. It's calling it space aliens. When you hear someone calling it space aliens, you know that they're operating on the premise that they believe this whole thing is nonsense and silly. Anyway, continuing, at the very least, the mere fact that some experienced military pilots entertain the more speculative alien-linked hypotheses suggests that the military is not processing information effectively. Does it make anyone feel better when reports from pilots are dismissed as crazy? So again, this person has not studied this. I mean, had he read some of the books by people like Timothy Good or Richard Dolan, he might be thinking differently on. But obviously, this person, who's a smart guy, does not buy it at all. He hasn't studied this. He doesn't believe it at all. He thinks that there might be other reasons for that explain UFOs, and it's incredible to me that people are this much in the dark. An intelligent person is this much in the dark, unless I'm not sure if I believe it in this case. I think in some cases there are disinformation people out there, to folk who put stories out there even on purpose in an effort to try to tamp down interest in the subject or or misdirect people on it, and maybe that's what's going on here. But I don't know. I don't think so. Anyway, he continues here. He says, UAPs will remain an issue as long as China and Russia and possibly other nations remain national security threats, because the United States military will always want to identify possible entrants to its airspace. Again, the United States has always been, they're always concerned about enemy countries, right, coming into the airspace. But this has nothing to do with this. This phenomenon has nothing to do with these other countries. Nothing. Anyway, no report or bureaucratic process can make those concerns go away, and so there is a kind of paralyzed equilibrium where a very strong force, the desire to know, has met an immovable object, a lack of knowledge. Yeah. He's saying that they don't know anything about it. That might be true in one sense, but I don't think it's the way he thinks, the way this guy thinks. Yeah, there's a lot the United States government probably knows nothing about with regard to these visitors or whatever they are, but it's not the way he thinks. He just thinks that they see these objects and they have no explanation for them. No, it's much deeper than that. There has been a cover-up, and if this guy would have done his research, he would have known that. But then again, even if he had done his research, maybe he wouldn't even have accepted it. But this is the way some people think. Anyway, continuing. In this sense, the frustration of the Senate Intelligence Committee, as expressed by its unanimous 17-0 vote, is understandable. The Pentagon's report presents many of the weaker UAP allegations and notes that there is no serious evidence to back them up, and it simply dismisses some of the stronger UAP puzzles, such as the Nimitz or Gimbal incidents. Anyway, continuing, he says, it is not until page 26 that the report concedes a small percentage of cases have potentially anomalous characteristics or concerning characteristics. Arrow has kept Congress fully and currently informed of its findings. Arrow's research continues on these cases. Let me just stop there. Okay, he's talking about this Arrow report. The Arrow report is a lot of people in the UFO community understand it was bogus. It was bogus. I mean, they told the same old how many years now? 1997, 2000, over 25 years ago, whatever. Almost 30-year report from the Air Force actually 30. The first one was 30 years ago, from 1994, and then they had the follow-up report where they talked about anthropomorphic dummies in 1997. I mean, they didn't even look into the Roswell case, despite the fact that there's hundreds and hundreds of different witnesses. A lot of them were military witnesses. They just completely accepted and accepted the Air Force's explanation about balloons and dummies and just didn't even talk about it in that report. This guy has no understanding of this subject whatsoever. But see, the problem I have with this is that this is in Bloomberg News. It's a major mainstream outlet, and a lot of eyeballs obviously would read something like this and they'll just walk away thinking, oh, see, they just don't know what it is. It's blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it has nothing to do with aliens, blah, blah, blah. See, this guy's smart. He knows what he's talking about, blah, blah, blah. That's the problem I have with stuff like this. It's a disservice. It's disinformation, whether this guy knows it or not. Anyway, he says here, yeah. He says a small percentage of cases of potentially anomalous characteristics or concerning characteristics. Arrow has kept Congress fully and currently informed of its findings. Yeah, what the findings? It's been a half-assed effort. Obviously, Arrow was compromised. Obviously, they got the Pentagon was they picked the director, the former director Sean Kirkpatrick. I mean, they got their own people running the show. I mean, obviously, yet when the Pentagon, who doesn't want to tell anybody about this, doesn't want this reality made public, they're going to put in their own people to run the show and to keep people guessing, keep people off track, keep people disinterested. Like, oh, it's not, we found nothing. See, nothing. It says Arrow's research continues on these cases. Those sentences should have been on the first page, and then the report should have presented the evidence about those cases. If this were an undergraduate term paper, I would have given it a D+. Yeah, see, again, this guy, I mean, he wouldn't be writing this way if he was completely made aware of the history of this subject. I just don't see how unless, again, how do we know? I don't know. Is it disinformation on purpose, or is he just ignorant? I don't know. It's either one or the other. Right? I think it's probably, in this case, this guy's just ignorant on it. He hasn't studied this situation whatsoever. He continues, he says, the chatter among insiders, some of which surely reaches senators, is that some of the data is very hard to explain. Some people, such as John Brennan, former head of the CIA, have even speculated that the available evidence might imply contact with the non-human civilization. Agree or disagree, the admission is a marker of our ignorance. Well, okay, John Brennan, the former head of the CIA, he knows. He knows that there's some non-human civilization here. They're just lying. He's lying. They've always been lying about this. Because conspiracy, to the extent there is one, is not to suppress evidence of different life forms. It is to avoid admitting the embarrassing absence of any real answers. So, at the very least, the Senate Intelligence Committee deserves credit for reopening the case. Okay, let me just, again, I just want to point out that, here we go. I just want to show this again. Okay, that we have evidence. Like, look at this. I mean, if you were to absorb the totality of the evidence with regard to the Vegas alien case, you would know that we have evidence now. We know that there's something here, obviously. Look at, there it is. There's an alien. That's an alien looking back at you right there. Anyway, continuing. He says, it can be hard to wrap your head around such huge issues. People are often more concerned with dismissing the possibility of alien life than with admitting the possibility of genuine uncertainty. And since even partial evidence of aliens might scare the public too much, there is an overriding incentive to keep matters under wraps. When I think about all this, I try to keep two questions separate. First, is there a major puzzle to account for? And second, what is the best explanation for that puzzle? It helps to focus on the first question in isolation, since we can't seem to keep our heads on straight when it comes to the second. By admitting that there is a real puzzle to be solved, the Senate Intelligence Committee has moved decisively to answer the first question. Once we clarify exactly what the puzzle is, maybe we'll be able to make some progress explaining it. Well, here's the problem. I mean, again, if that's the end of the article. I think if Tyler Cohen, he's a Bloomberg opinion columnist, a professor of economics at George Mason University, and host of the Marginal Revolution blog, had he researched this a little bit more, I mean, the answer you should already know. I mean, the evidence has all, even before the Vegas stuff, had anyone who studies this would know that there's a cover-up, would know that the government knows that there's something here, they know something about it, that Roswell was real, and so on and so forth. But see, that's the problem. That's the problem here, because of the atmosphere, the climate that was created decades and decades ago, and that continues into today in some respect, with regard to how the government has talked about this subject over the years. Like, he doesn't realize that they're lying. They've been lying about this. They know all about it. Why does some people have problems believing people like Grush? I mean, Grush. Why would Grush testify under oath? I mean, if he was lying, he could go to jail. They just seem like they have a big problem here, and they're just not accepting it, even though the evidence is there now. We have it, and it's being suppressed. It is being suppressed. There's no question in my mind about it. Some people just don't want to accept it, and it's you know what? What are you going to do? There's nothing you can do about it. You just have to deal with it, and that's all we have to say about it. Anyway, I'm going to move on here. I want to talk about some other interesting aspect. I want to talk about how, this is something that you hear a lot of different UFO researchers talk about, like Richard Dolan, for instance. He doesn't think that it wasn't until 1947 when this UFO thing really became a big deal, because we just didn't have those kind of sightings reports, sighting reports as we did. But starting in 1947, things turned around. Now there was some, in 1896 to 1897, there was the Great Airship Mystery. There were things like that throughout the history. There really weren't that many encounters with humanoids throughout those before 1947. You'll find some of them in the literature, but it really wasn't. There weren't a lot. Nowadays, there's a lot. I mean, a lot of people have had encounters with humanoids. We talk about it all the time on here. But guess what? There was some. Every now and then you'll find stories from ages ago, long before 1947, including in the 1800s, for instance. And I came across a case today that I thought was really interesting. This was, somebody had posted this on Reddit, and it was from 1883, and this was, of course, this was many years before. Well over a decade before the Great Airship Mystery. And I think that this possibly could have been an encounter with an alien creature, because it involved someone seeing a weird being and paralysis. And there was an article written about it in in a Maryland newspaper called the Maryland Standard. And the headline reads, "A queer old bugaboo." And it says, "What a little miss saw as she skipped along to the spring." And it says here, "A remarkable incident happened to a little daughter of Captain William L. Pratt of King George County last Monday evening. At 3 o'clock, she started to the spring about 200 yards from the house for a bucket of water. When about halfway, in passing a peach tree near the path, an indescribable sensation came over her. Her hair felt as though it was standing on end, and a heavy pressure on the shoulders almost crashed her to the earth. With difficulty, she walked to the spring, got her water, and started back. Arriving at the same tree, something came out of the weeds in front of her, crossed the path, and disappeared. The object appeared to be moving just above the ground, but not touching it. It was covered with something like an old coat, with the sleeves hanging down, one on each side. Its head was covered with short, kinky hair, and it seemed to have no face, eyes, or feet. Its disappearing in an open space seems to be the mystery, and the further fact that the weakness and pressure left the little girl as soon as it disappeared." So let me just stop there for a second. Yeah, imagine. Now that sounds to me like a classic humanoid encounter. I mean, the paralysis, so many different cases where people come across these creatures and they feel some kind of paralysis. And this is what this little girl was feeling at that time when she encountered whatever this thing was. Anyway, it says, "The little girl was very much alarmed at the time, and says while this object was passing, she could not have moved out of her tracks or spoken if her life depended on it." See? Yep, she was completely paralyzed when this thing was in front of her. She couldn't move. Similarly to the Vegas case, when they looked into the eyes of those beings, they couldn't move. The mother reports that she was as pale as a corpse when she reached the house. Her father, Captain Pratt, was in town, and she feared it was a token of some accident that had or would happen to him. She watched steadily for him until he got in sight of the house on his return, when she clapped her hands for joy and shouted, "Papa is coming." Captain Pratt says he is not a believer in ghosts or supernatural things, but this is a mystery which he cannot explain and which is giving him much concern. The little girl is about 11 years old. So I thought that story was really interesting because it's an apparent encounter. I mean, at the time, they weren't talking about extraterrestrials or non-human intelligence. They're thinking maybe ghosts or supernatural creatures. But I think, looking back at it now, I think it's, you could say that it possibly could have been an encounter with an extraterrestrial / non-human intelligent creature. That's what it sounds like to me. I think you don't really find a lot of reports of these in the past. You just don't see a lot of them. There was very scant reports of UFOs, before the 20th century. There just wasn't a lot. But every now and then there were reports like this. Not many, but some reports of humanoid encounters. And there were reports of other things, other kinds of UFO encounters. And here was an article I dug up. UFOs in the 19th century. This is from How Stuff Works. This was a case from 1853 where students at Burritt College in Tennessee noticed two luminous, unusual objects just north north of the rising sun. One looked like a small new moon, and another a large star. The first one slowly grew smaller until it was no longer visible, but the second grew larger and assumed a globular shape. Probably the objects were moving in a direct line to and from the witnesses or remaining stationary but altering their luminosity. Professor A.C. Carnes, who interviewed the students and reported their sighting to Scientific American, wrote, The first then became visible again and increased rapidly in size, while the other diminished, and the two spots kept changing thus for about half an hour. There was considerable wind at the time, and light, fleecy clouds passed by, showing the lights to be confined to one place. Carnes speculated that electricity might be responsible for the phenomena. Scientific American believed this was certainly not the case. Possibly the cause was distant clouds of moisture. As explanations go, this was no more compelling than electricity. It would not be the last time a report and an explanation would make a poor match. Unspectacular though it was, the event was certainly a UFO sighting, the type of sighting that could easily occur today. It represented a new phenomenon astronomers and lay observers were starting to notice with greater frequency in the Earth's atmosphere, and some of these sights were startlingly indeed. And here was another one that happened on July 13th in 1860 in Wilmington, Delaware. Residents looked up into the evening sky to see its source, a 200-foot-long something streaking along on a level course 100 feet above. Trailing behind it at 100-foot intervals cruised three very red and glowing balls. A fourth abruptly joined the other three after shooting out from the rear of the main object, which was giving off sparkles after the manner of a rocket. The lead object turned toward the southeast, passed over the Delaware River, and then headed straight east until lost from view. The incident, reported in the Wilmington Tribune July 30th, 1860, lasted 1 minute. So that sounds very familiar to a lot of sightings that we have today. In fact, it includes the orbs, the object with orbs floating around it. In this case, three, and then a fourth one joined it later that came out of the object itself. Obviously there were some sightings back in the old days, but not as many as we started to have starting in 1947. I think obviously we were under some sort of surveillance, it seems, but then we were really put under surveillance in the mid-1940s, possibly because of our atomic bomb usage. That's a lot of people think that's why they showed up in great numbers starting in the late 40s. And then here was that article continues. It says, during the 1850s and 1860s in Nebraska, settlers viewed some rather unnerving phenomena. Were they luminous serpents? Apparently not, but instead elongated mechanical structures. A Nebraska folk ballad reported one such unusual sighting. So they actually wrote a little folk ballad for it. And that folk ballad goes like this. "'Twas on a dark night in '66 when we was layin' steel, we seen a flying engine without no wing or wheel. It came a roaring in the sky with lights along the side and scales like a serpent's hide." Yeah, that's very interesting. So yeah, obviously every now and then there were sightings reported back in those days, but nothing like we have today. Something virtually identical was reported in a Chilean newspaper in April 1868 and reprinted in Zoologist in July 1868. On its body, elongated like a serpent, one of the alleged witnesses declared, we could only see brilliant scales which clashed together with a metallic sound as the strange animal turned its body in flight. There's more to this article. I'll leave a link to all of these things like I always do, but I just wanted to point these things out. This has been going on a long time. We've been playing stupid here with the general public on this topic for a long time now. It's just time to come clean already. Of course, I agree. Actually, Richard Dolan talked about in his recent podcast, we're not going to get any kind of disclosure this year. I think the only way that would happen is if there was some sort of a big giant event that makes it by the aliens themselves that makes it undeniable, and that's because of the presidential election that's ongoing. We're going to have to wait till after that's all said and done. So probably 2024 is out, even though government, we're talking about government disclosure. As far as disclosure goes, the public should be aware now. We're not alone. We have the evidence, as I've talked about on the show a number of times, as I talked about in this show here. And of course, there are elements, not only within the government, that want to keep that suppressed. No response from the Pentagon yet, as well as no response. Actually, crickets from a lot of people in the UFO community who want to. I guess they had other ideas on how disclosure should happen. They don't want it to happen this way. They don't want people to be aware of this. They don't want people to think about that case. They want people to forget about it, even though. There was how many cases, hundreds, thousands of cases of you look through the literature. There's a lot of different books out there that list all the different encounters that people have had over the decades with humanoids, with non-human intelligent entities, and a lot of people in the UFO community, a lot of the big names have no problem talking about that. But when they finally get a case where there's evidence, undeniable evidence to go along with it, that corroborates everything that the people experienced, they don't want to talk about it. That's me. I don't know. Is it in some cases, like I've said before, egomania? They want to be the ones that bring forth the evidence themselves. It's all about how much money they're going to make in the end. Maybe that's what it's about for some people, money and egomania. Some people, it's just that they think that we can't let the public know about this. We got to stay away from it. It's too harmful to the discourse. We need to have the government tell us about this, not us, not the people tell us about this. They don't want someone from just some regular people to come forward and say, here's the evidence. They don't like that. Who knows? It could be a multiple different reasons for it, but the evidence is out there. But it also, I want to also comment on on that editorial from that I read earlier from the Economist guy. And there's just something to keep in mind here. There's a lot of people just don't realize how small this Earth is in the grand scheme of things. If you were the universe, a lot of astronomers will tell you, it's 20. They'll say it's 27.4 billion light years in diameter. Okay. Now there's some new evidence that says it's even bigger than that, but let's stick with the 27.4 billion light years in diameter. If you were to shrink down that 27.4 billion years in diameter down to the size of the Earth. You know how big the Earth would be compared to the universe? It would be 180th part of an atom. That's how small we are. That's how small the Earth is compared to the universe. 180th part of an atom. We're smaller than a grain of sand in the grand scheme of things. So if you're out there and you think that there's nothing else out there, and you don't think there's anything to all these reports of alien encounters and UFO sightings and UFO landings and alien abductions and cattle mutilations, you're the crazy one, okay? You're the one who's not thinking straight. That's all I gotta say about that. I mean, because we're compared to the size of the universe, the Earth is completely, unbelievably small, incredibly tiny, smaller than a grain of sand. If you were to, like I said, if you were to crush it down to the size of the Earth, right, the universe, if you were to look at it in that kind of sense, we would only be a 180th part of an atom. That's how big we are. That's insane. But so people don't have that in mind when they think when they make these comments that it's silly to think that there's been a cover up and a crash retrieval program and alien bodies have been kept secret from the public. When the people say these kind of things, they're the ones who aren't thinking critically. You got to start thinking outside the box and realize how small the Earth is when in comparison to the universe, and when you look at all of the reports that people have filed with relation to UFOs over the years, all the reports that people have had with creatures that are obviously intelligent and non-human, how could you deny this at this point? And on top of it, now we have the evidence. There's no getting around it. The evidence is here now. All right, we got it, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. It's here. There are alien creatures here, and we have proven it. And so people could live with their head in the sand if they want to, but the rest of us, I think it's time to take this in a different direction. It's time to take it in a new direction, and a lot of people just aren't on board yet. I guess there's still maybe some people in the UFO community themselves, they're still in shock over this. They can't believe it. They just can't believe it. Anyway, I want to say thank you all for joining me. Until next time.